Oh, hi, everybody. I saw this article just the other day, and while I'm not a huge Dave Ramsey fan, I do think he has some valid points on many of his things. But this article kind of hit me because it was like, wait a minute. Saying people under 40 years old, if you don't retire a millionaire, there's nobody's fault but your own. And I was like, and then it goes on to talk about, hitting 11 million at 65, which I'm going to ignore that for right now. But I this kind of hit me because it's like under 40 years old. So that means somebody that's 39 could actually hit to be a millionaire. And I actually wasn't really too confident that you could, especially most Americans. And I went down here, and there is the article where he said it on supposedly Twitter. If you're under 40 years old and you don't retire a millionaire, there's no fault but yours. I then actually went out and I found an image of it saying pretty much the same thing, that if you're 40 years old and you don't retire a millionaire, there's no fault but yours. And if you're over 40, you better get serious. So I thought, well, let's look at, I've been using Dinkytown tools, and, I thought, let's try to use that and see if that would actually prove him wrong, or maybe prove him right. Again, while some of the things I really like about him, there's other things on his baby steps I'm not the biggest fan on. But again, he's out there helping a lot of people, and I do like that. So let's look at that right now. So here's our Dinky Down tools. I put in 39, so right below 40 to 67. I figured, in order to hit that $1 million, you're going to have to fully work till your full retirement age. I'm going to use my standard 8% return. And I'm going to start off with contribution rate of 10%, which again is my floor. That's what I use. I think you should be investing in saving more than that. But again, 10% I think is just a generic number that I think most Americans or people should be hitting. So I wanted to start with that. Then it was like, okay, what's the salary? And obviously, if you put in that somebody's making $300,000, I bet you they could do it. I mean, let's put in 300,000. And yeah, in 28 years, you could easily amass that. But that's not what most people make. And so I thought, well, let's start with that. I did put a 3% annual increase, which I think is reasonable. Could lower that a little bit or up it a little bit, but 3% is what I like to start off as, again, at a floor level, and no match. So I actually used AI. So if you're not familiar, Microsoft has Copilot, and you can use this. And I put in the question, what is the average salary of somebody that's 39 years old? And I thought, well, let's use that. And the average is 89, so almost $90,000. But that's taking into account, obviously, people that are making huge numbers. So the mean is typically a better number because that's where most people are at on a graph. So let's take that 62,500 and let's put it into our tool and see, could you become a millionaire right on off the bat? I really don't believe it, but let's try it. And you're close. It actually proves that you are pretty close. So before I start changing the percentage, again, this person's actually really close. Let's say that their company gives them a match, which I think again is very reasonable. And if we did 100% up to 3%, so they got a 3% match. I think that's, again, I use that as an average. I think it's actually a little bit higher, but you can actually see here $1 million in 28 years using the mean salary of somebody that's 39. That is actually quite shocking. If we come back down to the graph here, I think you can really see some of the numbers. And again, the graph gives you that nice curve. It shows the value of time in the market. At 39, really you start off with nothing. And by the time you're 49, you're not even 20% there. If you go to 59, you're just over half of the way. That's amazing. Actually, in 20 years of the 28, you're just around half. And that means that really in only 9 more years, you actually put yourself over the threshold of that savings. That's actually pretty interesting to kind of see. Wouldn't have expected that. Well, let's again pretend that maybe your company didn't give you a match, because I think that would be in your worst case scenario. What percentage would you have to do? I'm going to say 12%. Okay, maybe it's only 13%. Not a huge amount, but again, that puts you over. Let's go back to and put the 10%. And let's pretend that you were average, which maybe some of the people that are watching here would be more inclined to. So this is where you're almost making $90,000 a year. And this is when you're 39. So even with no match in 28 years at a 10%, you can clearly do it. Again, it just takes time, effort, and you can again see that in 20 years, you're a little over halfway there. So it's definitely possible. I'll give Dave Ramsey credit right now. I was actually a skeptic when I first saw this article. I thought starting so late, you'll never be able to do it. But I think he's actually proven you right. Obviously, if you're making that average salary, if you're making below, you're really gonna, he is right, you're gonna struggle. If you're into that, maybe let's say that $50,000 range, you're probably really gonna have to get into, what do you think, like an 18%, maybe even less. Okay. I'll give him credit. You can do it. So focus. I think that's what it takes. And again, look at this graph and actually see that you really have to be invested for a long period of time before it really starts to make a difference. And all these years is what helps to make that difference at the end. Thank you.